Excuse me.
We can actually.
Oh, that's fine, but you put it the wrong way. You put it the wrong way. So,
Sure. No, that way is fine.
no, let's flip it and then.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
so we see the
okay,
screen.
okay. Because this side is supposed to be on this side.
Yeah. Because then you can't read the comments. Everyone asks.
Or hold the phone. There, get it.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh. Guess we should have left it that way. Okay. Let's go.
No, we leave it like that. That's right there.
It's because of the rubber.
They'll get some. Well, at least the phone didn't fall out this time.
This thing open or what happened?
No, it just popped out. It's pockets.
Right, what do you say?
I think his phone's too heavy.
Oh, well, we won't have to read the comments.
Yeah, just flip it how you had it.
Yeah. She hates us now. She's gonna hate us before. Oh, like that? Like that?
Let me just put him on.
What if we ask him to take off his face?
I'm gonna take it off right now. Here.
No, don't take it off because if it falls.
Can you see it? There we go.
Just keep an eye on it.
Okay, high five. So wait, we do get that piece part, right? So Nimsy signed the paper? Yeah, I know. We said Nimsy signed the wrong office. Did you get one to us?
Oh, yeah, the one that's yes.
Alright. So we know we got IT. So we automatically get that.
And then I just need to come in on Friday and do all my work. To make sure everything and then also, like, this is all I need to do. You want to do the 10 hours with you? But I can do more than I can do the hours.
Katie Garner.
Katie Garner, one.
Text hi. All we gotta do is sit down.
Thank you. Although, then I need to speak for my sister too.
If you guys have questions, just comment them in and we'll ask and you'll get your answer.
So I think we're ready to go. Are you already live?
Yeah.
All right. Katie Gannon just joined. All right.
Well, it sounds like the crowd is quieting down, so I guess that's the start. Well, thank you all for coming. My name's Trace English, and I'm with Sustainable Tucson. And this is the Sustainable Tucson Candidates Forum for City Council. We've cut. You mean you can't hear me? There we go.
If they have hearing aids, they can't make sense if you don't use the mic.
Do or do not?
They can't understand.
They can't hear you if you don't use the mic.
I will use the mic. There we go. This is Building Our Sustainable Future Together. It's the Sustainable Tucson Candidates Forum 2017. And we're very happy to have all of the candidates for City Council here, almost all of them at any rate. First, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors. We have Local First Arizona, which is the small business association throughout the state. Progressive Democrats of Arizona, Pima County Food Alliance, the Citizens Water Coalition, and our host for this evening is Changemaker High School. And Luis, if Luis is here. Ah, there's Luis. There we go.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to welcome everyone. I'm Luis Peranes. I'm the CEO here at the Institute for Transformative Education. We are the parent organization for Changemaker High School. And this is exactly in line with our mission. So we're very happy to have the opportunity to be a co-host for tonight's event. Just some housekeeping, just so if anybody needs, I know there's going to be great conversation. If anybody needs a water fountain, right off his door to the right, or the water fountains, as well as bathrooms. So bathrooms are right in that area. So just taking care of some housekeeping. But again, thank you so much for coming out. This is one of many community events that we host throughout the year. And again, we're very, very thankful for our co-hosts from Tress for requesting, because we are an organization that is always open to community. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all the candidates.
Well, Sustainable Tucson is an organization that's actually been here for 11 years. We do regular monthly meetings to educate people on the goals or the sustainability issues of Tucson, and we also organize other events such as the Envision Tucson Sustainable Festival. This will be our 7th festival this November, and the Feeding Tucson program as well. So the goal of Feeding Tucson, or the mission, is that we collaborate with others through advocacy and education to continue Tucson's progress as a resilient, equitable, and beautiful desert-adapted community. So the issue of sustainability is totally in line with what we're doing. Tonight's candidates are going to be discussing certain key issues related to sustainability. Over the summer, this is the third meeting. We've had over 60 people engaged in developing a series of principles of sustainability, because there are many different ways of approaching it, but we need to know what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So we developed a series of principles related to sustainability. There are actually many others besides the three that we're going to be discussing tonight. But the three that we're discussing tonight are actually ones that the city has a great deal of responsibility for as well. So on the backstop there, next to the Changemaker High School logo, you'll see the three principles that we've asked the candidates to discuss this evening. They are a renewable water supply that serves our needs. So the principle is we should understand, prioritize, and develop dependable and renewable water supplies that serve our sustainable needs. Climate-ready and affordable transportation. We should evolve our transportation system so that all Tucsonans have access to safe, affordable, climate-friendly ways to connect to each other and to local businesses and services. And relocalization and local economic redevelopment. We should focus on economic development efforts on serving people and local businesses and on building local capacities. So we're going to be asking the candidates to discuss four questions related to those topics. So each question, each topic area, we're asking each candidate to answer four questions. What do you think about the principle? Are the city's policies consistent with those principles? And what happens if we start having changes like CAP shortages or federal cutbacks? What should the city be doing in this, if anything? And what's the next step? So what we'll be doing tonight is they've already gotten the questions, and they will be discussing their views on those topics. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves to you, and then each question they'll have 3 minutes to cover those topics. At the end, there will be a 2-minute closing statement, and then, I'm sorry, there's one more question, which is how can the city work with the county, and how can the city work with the public in order to make these things a reality? They'll have 2 minutes for that. And then finally, there'll be a minute closing statement from each candidate. Now, the logistics that we have is we have our timekeeper here, and he will tell us when we have a minute and a half minute left to go.
For 1 minute, 15 seconds, okay? And then if you're more than 15 seconds over, you're going to be seeing me.
We don't have a long cane, but we'll figure out something. All right, so with no further ado, I guess we'll go ahead and start. Steve, if you would like to make an introduction to the people here.
This guy's not armed, is he?
Ron, you made it.
I'm going to do it this way. I don't want to yank something over. I don't know what's on the other side of that. Don't start yet.
It's about as far as it'll go.
Okay. Then I won't do any more. Thank you for the invitation, Tres and Sustainable Tucson and local Arizona. This is an interesting opportunity to be able to share. Tres was right. Not all the candidates are here, and so I'm going to take my 2 minutes of introduction to introduce the candidate who's not here. I think you ought to know who is running as my Republican opponent. His name is Mariano Rodriguez. He is a huge Trump supporter. In fact, he is, he does not believe that should be relevant to this conversation. In terms of the environment, it absolutely is relevant. Mr. Rodriguez is a full supporter of building the border wall. Had he been here tonight, I would have been asking him to justify that in terms of the environment and its environmental impacts. And if he still believes that Mexico is actually going to pay for it, even Trump doesn't believe that anymore. Would ask him also to justify the evisceration of the Environmental Protection Agency that's happening under the Trump administration right now in the context of the environment. In addition to that, the revitalization of the coal industry, the Dakota Access Pipeline that Mr. Trump is catalyzing. If Mr. Rodriguez were sitting here now, I would want him to explain to this community how that reflects our values in Tucson. Rescinding national monument status for properties all over the country is something that this administration is doing, including our own Sonoran Desert, by the way. And that in the context of Mr. Rodriguez's support for the Rosemont copper mine. I would like to hear him explain that to this group. Evidently, Mr. Trump believes that chaos is the ladder to success and that we're going to make our way to environmental sustainability by just creating chaos. Mr. Rodriguez would need to explain that as well. He was so taken by the Trump election that he cried. He admitted that to a CNN reporter. A lot of us cried when Trump was elected, but not out of joy. And so I'm sorry that he's not here to answer those questions for you. That is an introduction of him. I will be using the rest of this time to help to introduce myself through answering these various questions. So thank you for showing up tonight.
Good evening. My name is Tom Tronsdale, and I'm one of the Democratic candidates for the Ward 3 City Council. I'm really excited to be here tonight because the idea of sustainable Tucson is what I've been talking about during my whole campaign. The idea that we need to collaborate and advocate together is essential. If we aren't talking to each other and if we aren't working together, a lot of these solutions that we're looking for are not going to happen. First of all, as a longtime Tucsonan, when we talk about advocating together and collaborating, I look at the different solutions and resources the city provides. And personally, I believe I am in a great position to advocate for a sustainable Tucson because of my prior experiences here in Tucson. I've worked with many local social service agencies in my ward, everything from Catholic Community Services to the Prince Road Salvation Army to my son's school, the Abbey School. So when we talk about partnering with local people and local groups and hearing what people have to say, I've done that. And then when we talk about relocalization and redevelopment of our business, I understand that too. I own Canyon Fence Company, and I've worked hard with my employees to build and grow a business that contributes to our community and provides a fair and living wage and job development for people in our community. And then we also talk about collaborating with the schools, and we talk about collaborating with the neighborhoods. And I've done that, whether it's part of the Campus Farms Neighborhood Association or local different neighborhood groups. So my different experiences lend me to the idea that we can advocate together and collaborate, because I've seen it when we come together and work together and we have a common vision, we'll succeed. The idea of engagement and empowerment in our community is essential. Too many people are not being heard right now, and unless we reach out as a city and as an individual, change will not happen. So I look forward to learning more tonight about all of your ideas and discussing some of mine. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Gary Watson. A lot of you haven't heard me yet. I am the independent candidate running for Ward 3 for City Council. I'd like to take a minute to introduce myself to you and invite you to come and take a look at who we are as candidates and what we're running for on the independent ticket. I will be facing one of the fine Democrats here in Ward 3 when they get done with their primary, and you'll hopefully see some of us debating face-to-face at that point in time. I'm a firefighter in Tucson. I've been a firefighter for 20 years. I've been a public servant. Serving on City Council will help me take my public service to the next level. I've always been about the citizens of Tucson. I've dedicated my life to serving them in my job, and I will do the same thing with City Council. As a firefighter, one thing we believe is we take care of the community no matter what. Regardless of race, sex, age, economic status, anything that goes along with it, we respond, we take care of them. I believe our City Council should be doing the same thing. They should represent all of Tucson and all of Pima County, as a matter of fact. Tucson will always be the cultural hub, and we should be working with our partners around Southern Arizona to make all of Southern Arizona stronger. Tucson will prosper for that. I'm also a teacher with the JTED program in Tucson. I've been there for 9 years. We believe in developing our students, our youth, as they graduate so they're ready for the workforce in Tucson. If we don't provide a solid workforce, it's harder to sustain our business that's here locally. It's hard to bring in new businesses. So those are two of my primary objectives: is a sustainable workforce, and as a firefighter, to bring public safety and to bring collaboration around the entire region. Thank you.
Thanks to the sponsoring organizations here tonight, and thanks to you all for caring enough to come here. I am proud to say that I have the endorsement, the exclusive endorsement of the Progressive Democrats Tucson chapter, and see many people I know in the audience. Since sustainability is a theme tonight, you might have noticed that it's under attack by Donald Trump. Pulling out of the Paris Accords was just plain stupid. I'll stand up for the sustainability policies that are under attack by Trump, and there are many of them. Thankfully, cities around the U.S. are already stepping up, and that's why I'm proposing a goal to operate Tucson city government on 100% renewable energy by 2025. Now, I've done my homework with a combination of energy efficiency improvements in city buildings, solar panels on city buildings and other facilities throughout Tucson, and a large solar farm on city-owned land in Abra Valley. We can get there. We should be a leader in sustainable energy, especially solar. With my 100% goal and plan, we can be that leader. Solar energy and sustainability is not just a campaign slogan. For me, it's my way of life. I live in a net zero house, drive an electric car powered by the panels on the roof, do large-scale rainwater harvesting and gray water, and have permaculture landscaping. I walk the walk on sustainability.
Mike Cease actually asked me to make his statement for him. And nothing in the rules says I can't. My name is Najima Rainey. I'm actually Mike Cease's campaign manager. I am excited to be here at Changemaker High School because this is my son's high school. The spirit here is why I'm so excited to send my son to school here. I'm standing here not just because I believe in Mike Cease as a person of integrity and principles, but in the ability of the Green Party to represent the real values of Tucson. I was raised in a left-leaning household. I believe in things like union, civil rights, equality, you know, the standard bearers of liberalism. And I was also raised to vote Democratic because there are Black Republicans, but they're not invited to my grandma's house. And the thing is that I didn't have any other choice. Who was I gonna vote for? It took working with Mike Cease and other Green Party candidates for me to recognize that they are committed to livable wages, environmental sustainability, and dismantling structures of inequality. And it took that for me to recognize that the Democratic Party has never actually fought for my beliefs. They give lots of lip service to it, but they only ever compromise and broker deals that dilute and render ineffective their promises to change. We're running out of time. We're living in an economic and environmental apocalypse, and we don't have time to placate people who are denying the obvious anymore. So when you're listening to these candidates tonight, I want you to listen and see who is advocating for the status quo and who's actually bringing new ideas, new change. I believe in Mike Cease, and what I believe the most is that even if we can't save the world, we can save this town.
Good evening. My name is Felicia Chew, and I'm running for City Council for Ward 3. So first of all, there's a couple people I wanted to acknowledge who I see in the audience representing some different groups. So please stand and be acknowledged. Parker? I'm putting you on the spot. He is one of the market managers over at Ireland Farmers Market, so thank you, Parker, for really coordinating that. He really helps people, and the market folks come out. Layla? She is one of the folks who worked with Strong Start Tucson and making sure people understood that that was out there. Jana, she's like, what? Okay, Jana, her husband Dan is actually a watershed management group docent, and Jana also does a blog on sustainability. There's a few, there's other people in here too. Oscar Medina is a teacher here at Changemaker. He teaches the government class and civic engagement and things like that. And there was somebody else. Cesar is in the back. Wait. What is your name? Oh my gosh. Sorry. It's been a year. So, raise your hand and wave to the audience. Okay, so he was the one who was over at Utterback when I was there, and we were getting a community garden going. So there's a lot of different folks who are in this room who I've had relationships with, and as councilwoman, what I would do is continue those relationships, and I would continue to advocate for these groups. Because in Ward 3, there are 84,000 residents, and of those 84,000 residents, only 8,000 of them are likely to vote. So we need to consider that. We need to think about the people. There's a fly. I'm waving at the fly. There are people who don't have a voice because they don't know how they can have their voice. I will advocate and amplify people's voices. So I do have on my back table, also I'm a member of Local First Arizona, one of the sponsors. Lori's card is back there, and I encourage you to join and be a part of Local First. Thank you so much.
Now we'll get to the substance of the meeting. Not that the candidates themselves aren't the substance, because that's actually the real substance of the meeting. But I did want to tell you about something I did overlook. You have a card on your chair. You should. And if during the course of the discussion you come up with a question that you'd like to ask. Okay. I got to actually. Okay, there we go. I know how to use these things. If you think of a question, please fill that out and wave it around, and we'll come by and pick it up. At the end, we will have some time to ask questions, to give some of those questions to the candidates, and they will have a minute each to answer the questions. So, what I'd like to do now is begin with the issue of sustainable water. The principle we developed was we should understand, prioritize, and develop dependable and renewable water supplies that serve our sustainable needs. So the 4 questions that relate to that are, what do you think about this principle? Are the city's current policies consistent with that, or will events force us to change? What should the city do about this, or should the city be involved at all? And what's the next step? So I would like to have Tom start. You have 3 minutes.
The current policy principle I completely agree with. Water is a valuable resource that we must treasure and try to maximize in our community. The city has done a really fantastic job actually in its water policy. In fact, in all my reading and all my studies, Tucson is probably the leading city in the West in terms of its water policy and water planning. I give a lot of credit to the city for its long-term planning. It just doesn't happen overnight. And I think when we talk about what can we do next, we need to continue this policy of water conservation. And I think what the city has done best is be proactive instead of reactive. Too often we only react when things get bad. And part of the reason the city is thriving so well with its water policy is because it's been proactive. I think one of the best ways for water to continue to be, to thrive in its current way is that we need to make sure that water use and economic growth, that growth is paid for by the user and not by the city. If we look at things like a tiered water plant, so the people that use the most water pay the most, I think that'd be really important. But ultimately, a really best way for our community to make a difference in water policy is through education. The fact is, most people don't know how to utilize and conserve water on a daily basis. And the city must keep reaching out. That is the next step for the city. The city must utilize all of its resources to let people know the different ways they can utilize and conserve water. There are things that people don't know about, and I talk about engagement and empowerment. People only know what they know. Unless the city reaches out to them and tells them and informs them and holds workshops, they're not going to know how to help make a difference. I know when, I have a flat roof house, and when we rebuilt part of our house, we've noticed that when it rains, we just flood all around the side of our house. And we said, well, how can we use this to water our plants? So what we did was we redid our entire front yard with a xeriscape yard with some minimal plants, and then we redistributed the rock from where the water would overflow from our roof into the front yard, where we now use it to water our plants and disseminate into the rest of the yard. That was a small thing, but it made a big difference in using the water we have, the rainwater, and at the same time watering my yard. Those are the kind of things that, unless I had been informed about them, I would have known what to do. And I think that happens for a lot of people. They don't know what to do. And the city must reach out to them through workshops to let them know, either as an individual, as a neighborhood. You know, you can look at things like curb cutting or water runoff to make sure people know how to make a difference. And in the future, I think that's where the city will continue to make a difference, is through its existing water policy and informing the public on how they can make a difference.
So obviously, we all know how important water is to our way of life. Just to even being able to have a city, we obviously have to have a sustainable water. Being in a desert environment, we have different challenges than you'll find in other parts of the country. And I think you're going to hear up here, a lot of us will probably say some of the similar things. The city of Tucson has done an excellent job with the way we've done our water department. If anything, they're one of the most efficient government agencies I've been reading up on. They've done a very good job of maintaining their billion-dollar facility with all the 4,000 miles of water mains we have. We have plenty of water basins that have done a great job. We've cut our per capita down to one of the lowest in the state. About 75% of that per capita that goes with residential. It's not as much the commercial. So to continue to sustain that, we need to make sure we continue the education programs. That with residential housing, we continue to encourage with new construction that we have low volume fixtures, low volume toilets, low volume shower heads. We can continue to push more for some of the gray water to be reused for landscaping. These are some very standard practices that you'll find around a lot of areas. Tucson's already done a very good job of that. When we start talking about how much is the city involvement, I think it's absolutely the city's one of their primary roles. Without water, none of us is sustainable. We need water for everything we do in our daily lives. I think the city should continue to look at ways to try to capture the rainwater from the monsoons. Wonderfully, we've had a great monsoon season this year, but there's a lot of water that I see go down those washes, and if we could find better ways to capture some of that, help replenish some of our aquifers through that rainwater, would be a good long-term solution. It's not something we're going to be able to do in the next year or two, but that would be a long-term plan. Find ways like Tempe has a Tempe Park. The water park they have there gives them a water basin. Tucson could look at something like that. It will be very expensive, but it would be worth it in the long run. It would be an investment worth making back in our community. The next steps, I think we do continue what Tucson Water's been doing. We continue to step up our education process for our citizens. When it comes to new buildings, we encourage new buildings to have new technologies, not just with water, but we've talked about solar as well, renewable energy. There's a lot of new building designs that they can use with buffer spaces that allows the hot air to escape the building before it comes inside. Different building construction techniques allow for those new buildings to be more energy efficient. U of A has actually done a very good job with all the buildings they're building, taking the LEED program and also making them as energy efficient as possible. The downside is that does get expensive and it does cost money to be sustainable at times. So we have to find a happy balance with mandating too much sustainability built into our buildings, but still allowing businesses to be able to grow and prosper. So I think we continue with our processes that we're doing. We continue to encourage the education and continue to encourage our citizens to understand the value and importance of our water.
Let's look at my actions, not just my words. We installed a 10,000-gallon rainwater harvesting system at home that collects from 100% of the roof and fills once from the summer rains and once from the winter rains. We save 20,000 gallons per year in water used for outdoor plants. I agree with this principle. Sustainable water is especially important as we face the effects of global warming. We will see a long-term trend towards warmer and drier conditions here in Tucson. Are the city's current policies consistent with this principle? Mostly. We're doing a good job with conservation and with aquifer recharge. The Avra Valley storage and recovery projects are the largest such facilities in the country. On conservation, Tucson Water pumps the same volume as it did in 1985 with about 226,000 more residents. But we're still dependent on cap water. About 83% of the potable water Tucson Water delivers is recharged cap water. I would, however, be on the lookout for ways to do more in conservation and aquifer recharge. Our water service area policy, first adopted in 2010, is a powerful tool to discourage sprawl. What is the city's involvement in implementing this? Due to the importance of Tucson Water, Mayor and Council and the city are very involved in implementing water policies. But we can work with groups like Watershed Management, whose founders happen to be my next door neighbors, by the way, to achieve even greater gains. So what's the next step? We should prioritize the drought contingency plan negotiations. We should turn stormwater into a water resource by implementing low-impact development, or LID, concepts. LID is an approach to stormwater management that emphasizes the use of small-scale natural drainage features integrated throughout the city to slow, clean, and infiltrate and capture urban runoff and replenish the local aquifers by slowing it down and letting it drain into the ground. We should implement One Water, or integrated water management principles. One Water and integrated water management says that you need to get maximum use out of every drop of water that's available. Stormwater is a water resource just as much as groundwater or any other supply. There are cost-effective ways of using and storing stormwater so that we can offset the use of potable water. We should look at neighborhood stormwater projects. The Tucson Water's existing subsidy rebate program is for individual properties. And we should develop programs to extend rainwater harvesting to low and moderate income families. We could have, in conjunction with the rebates, we could have revolving loans repaid from savings on the water bill. In other words, if your water bill is $100 and if you put in rainwater harvesting, it goes to $75, then $25 a month goes to repay that $500 loan on the rainwater cistern. Thanks.
Is this mic on? Pertaining to renewable water, I think we need to look at the storyline of the status quo. The storyline of the status quo is that we offer taxpayer subsidies to firms such as the Hughes Aircraft Corporation, who, as most of you know, back in the 1950s, dumped trichloroethylene, they just dumped it out. That's still with us. It hasn't gone away. People are still sick. People are still dying, predominantly on the south side. There's another term for this. It's known as environmental racism. The storyline is that when we offer taxpayer subsidies to companies like this that we bring in from the outside, they exploit us by paying low wages, they contaminate our groundwater, and then they ship their profits out of state. It's still with us. We have TCE, we have dioxane. And this is decades later. And that's one of the reasons that my campaign is working with the Environmental Justice Task Force. The other issue I'd like to mention pertaining to water is, and some of the others have already alluded to this, is water harvesting. We're going to change the status quo on this as well. We're going to retrofit thousands of homes and businesses with water harvesting. We're going to work with groups, local groups, such as the Watershed Management Group and others. Thank you.
So I'm going to break form a little bit here. I have a song for you that I wrote because I was inspired by the Watershed Management Group. You don't get to hear the whole thing because I got to talk about policies and what I would do, but it goes like this. I see the saguaro, I see the mesquite, I see the prickly pear and the fruit that we can eat. I see the stealthy bobcat, the javelina too. I see the bats from the bridge and avoid their guano poo. But I don't see the water, and I don't hear the roar of the mighty burrito across the Tucson floor. And then there's a whole bunch of verses that go with it. But I was inspired by that, by the Watershed Management Group, which is the place where I go and I volunteer. We do labor with our neighbor, and they are all focused on having smart water practices and teaching us how we can do that, whether I'm a low-income person or I'm somebody who has a lot of money. So I'm going to go back to the question. So yes, I do believe in this principle. Besides writing songs, I have also, while I taught at Mansfield, I reached out to the, I just forgot the name of them now, but they came out and they did a water audit. There were students from the University of Arizona, and they had their project leader, D5, who came out, and all of my students and I, we went out and we changed out all of the aerators. Before we changed out the aerators, we measured it, and we were able to come up with, I forgot, it was a huge number of gallons of water that we saved. Going on to number 2, our current policy is consistent with the principle. For the most part, yes. Number 3, should the city be involved, and how can it be involved? Most definitely, absolutely. The city needs to be involved. We're in a desert. We're supposed to protect the rights of people. Number 4, next steps. What can we do? So let me see. Here are my ideas. One thing we've talked about is educating folks about the difference between native versus invasive species. So we've all been hit by the monsoons, and I've got all these things growing. In fact, I have bugged Jana already to come over to my home and help me identify my edibles. So a lot of you, maybe you see the purslane and you think, oh, it's a weed, what am I going to do with it? You need to get onto Jana's blog, and you need to check that out. Farmers markets, we've got those going on in here already. The city needs to be able to provide space. The county has already done it. We've got over at First and River and by the Rito racetrack, we have these covered Ramada areas. In Davis, California, where I lived before I moved to New Mexico, where I helped build a home that was 100% sustainable with water catchment, with all of that good stuff, we had farmers market, and there was like a ride-along carousel that we pumped with our legs. I'm down on time, so I'm going to throw out a couple other things. We need to show people how to make waffle gardens. That's a Zuni practice. We need to be able to protect our smart water policies. We can't just be giving away our water. With that, we need to have incentives and policies that are going to allow people like me, who want to have this cistern, who want to take advantage of the rainwater harvesting program. We need to have it actually accessible. So I need to stop because he's cutting me off. Thanks.
First of all, with respect to the notion that sustainability is expensive, as a matter of fact, the payback is both financial and environmental, and what's expensive is ignoring this as a goal. We have the two most important things that we address at the City Council are budget and water. There are no 2 more important things that we deal with. So absolutely, this goal is consistent with our responsibilities at the council level. We've been taking our full cap allocation since I started on this council, with one exception. That was last year, and I'll get to that in a second. We now have about 3 years water supply stored for a rainy day, pardon the pun. But that's the result of this council's action and this council's focus on this goal. Last year, we left 26,500 acre-feet of water on Lake Mead. The reason we did that is because we're trying to work with the state and with the lower basin states to prevent a shortage declaration on Mead. Our doing that, though, was offset by a deal that we cut with the Phoenix municipality. When they shipped water down to us, we are storing for them in our underground storage facilities now, because we have been so proactive, as Tom was saying, in putting these facilities together, so that now Phoenix is relying on us to help bail them out when they don't have the facilities to store their water. And this is a big deal, not only for the region, but for the lower basin states as well. So Phoenix is trying to play catch up with us. We do have a tiered conservation-based water rate structure. That, again, is something that this council has put a high priority on. And we have conservation incentives that others have spoken about here, so I'm not going to reiterate those. And they are for rainwater harvesting, for gray water, and for the cisterns and all of that. And we do have, by the way, low-income incentives for all of those as well. With respect to the 1,4-dioxane and the TCE. We put in place an advanced oxidation plant even while the city was still negotiating a settlement with the United States Air Force. Before we knew who was going to pay for that, we told Tucson Water, go build that plant, because it's so important to this community to make sure that that water is being treated. There's a group called the Unified Community Advisory Board, the UCAB, that anybody in this room can participate in their quarterly meetings that involve the EPA, the City of Tucson, and that water is being cleaned up and is a very transparent process. Next steps, DCP, I believe Paul mentioned that, the drought contingency plan. DCP Plus, though, is the intrastate agreement that we're working with. We also have an intentionally created supply deal with the tribes that we're negotiating as well. We had a lot of that going just really well until Trump was elected. Then the wheels came off the tracks. We're back to renegotiating. I see Madeline Kaiser in the back. She and I co-authored an op-ed to Governor Ducey that appeared in the Republican and the Star for a thing called the Governor's Water Advisory Council. It's about 28 different agencies, most of which are things like the cattle industry, the mining industry, cotton industry. We need to get more conservation minds on that council, and that's something that we'll continue to work on.
Great. Well, water is certainly a key issue, but so is transportation. So the question is, or the policy is, we should evolve our transportation system so all Tucsonans have access to safe, affordable, climate-friendly ways to connect to each other and to local businesses and services. So I'd like to start with Gary.
Transportation has come up in every forum we've talked about. Obviously, with Tucson, we have a need to improve our bus system, to make sure our routes are efficient, to make sure we expand our usership of it. Public transportation is a way of life for a lot of people, and we need to make sure we can maintain that and maintain the affordability of it. The reality with it is it's not as expensive as we think it is. The budget has actually been handling it pretty well. We do have a little bit of room where we can expand in there, but we also need to make sure that the efficiencies are continued to be monitored. There are things we can look at to make it better. We can look at more energy efficient buses, whether we go with electric buses or more natural gas. We can go with different size buses based on the price per mile to run those. But most importantly, it's looking at those routes and making sure that they're meeting the needs of our community. The buses are just one part of it. We also have a wonderful bike plan that we haven't been able to fully implement for bike paths throughout Tucson to make it more accessible. Walking paths as well. We've done a great job of completing the majority of the loop around Tucson. I actually enjoy riding that. It rides around Ward 3. So we can continue those processes to make Tucson more friendly for bikes so it's safer. One thing I've noticed in Tucson this year that has me very concerned is our number of pedestrians that we've had struck and killed. As a firefighter, we respond to these. The number so far this year is twice what we had last year, and we're only halfway through the year. Part of that deals with our transportation of not having enough crosswalks, not having enough lit crosswalks. That goes along with buses as well. We've had some of the bus stops that aren't in safe areas, aren't lit, aren't protected, that have had some of those accidents as well. Last numbers I looked at, we've had 16 pedestrians struck and killed this year by cars. That has to be concluded in part of our transportation plans. It can't just be about improving roads and improving the buses. We have to make sure we improve the safety as well. The city's doing a lot to improve those roads, which does help with the transportation. It helps get vehicles across town faster so we're not having them on the road as long. Eliminating some of those emissions. I've been trying to look into some differences we can do with the way we pave our roads. Part of that is adding additional funding into the roads that is specific for maintenance. So once we do put in new roads, we have funding to do a maintenance code on them, which gives them another 3 years of life, so we can extend the life on the ones that we have been able to replace. Some of the roads we're still trying to replace are going to cost more because they have additional drainage issues that need to be accounted for. So we may not be able to get as many miles when you're talking about more cost per mile with that, but we can certainly make sure that we budget to maintain the ones that we put in. There's another interesting thing I've been reading up on, trying to find more about it, where some cities are starting to paint their roads white. I think in our residential neighborhoods, this could be a fantastic idea. It cuts down on the heat emission from the road. It actually does have some emulsions in it that make the road last longer as well, so it goes along with the maintenance. And we can continue to look at new technologies as they emerge like this to help lower the heat and maintain the life of these roads.
I agree with this principle. Our transportation system should be safe, affordable, and climate friendly. Are the city's policies consistent with this principle? Not really. We rely too much on the automobile. We should place a greater emphasis on the other three legs of the transportation system: pedestrians, bicycles, and transit, including streetcar. How do I see the city's involvement? Central. Transportation, whether it's sidewalks, roads, or transit, is one of the most important things city government provides. What's the next step? We should electrify our bus fleet. I got actual data from Suntran for the last CNG bus that we acquired. Then I approached a major manufacturer of electric buses and asked for cost comparisons. The bottom line is we can save $100,000 over the life of a bus with an electric bus. Again, conservation, renewable energy saves money. It doesn't cost money. We should fund the Bicycle Boulevard Master Plan. What is it? It's an integrated system of bike routes on residential streets. The goal is to get cyclists off of the arterials and onto residential streets where they're much safer and they're lower stress. I mean, it's more fun to ride on a residential street, a lot. We should start gradually with the most needed routes first, and then in about 3 to 4 years, when the city acquires additional bonding capacity, we should put together a transportation package that includes funding for the Bicycle Boulevard Master Plan.
Transportation, as you all know, is a complex issue. The status quo has been to support, as Paul mentioned, the auto-only mode of transportation, and that's an entrenched force that we're up against. I believe that we need to think outside the box and outside the status quo. I agree with the principle of clean energy, affordable transit. However, this should be taken much further than just affordable. I believe that transportation is a basic necessity. It's a basic right for all members of our community. And so, as such, it should be provided. There's a lot of, when these transportation questions come up before all the candidates, and they've talked about them before, the question is always asked, well, great ideas, how are we going to pay for this? I'd like to ask, how are we going to pay for the auto-only mode of transit that's entrenched with us? There are massive subsidies that are already paid for and provided that we all pay for the automobile-only mode of transit. So nobody questions those subsidies. I think that to question funding for transit is asking the wrong question. I think that's a basic need. It's a basic need for our community. And we can reprioritize our budget. And so I would like to see us think outside the box on this issue. Thank you.
So we're talking about climate ready and affordable transportation. Number one, what do I think about this principle? Yes, we have to have climate ready and affordable transportation. Number two, are current policies consistent with the principle? Sort of. Number three, should the city be involved and how can it be involved? Absolutely. So we know when there are problems, usually the first and the worst hit are women and children. So when we look at people trying to get jobs, trying to have to be transported across town to get from to work, to school, etc. We've talked about this before. If we don't have reliable transportation, they can't do it. My second son, who's in his 20s, he's in the Army Reserves, yada, 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 he was doing a part-time job. And he did not have a vehicle because he's like, Mom, I'm going to try this without a personal vehicle. And he was trying to take the bus. Couldn't do it. could not get to work on time. And I know people could say, oh, he could have gone to the bus stop earlier. Didn't matter. Okay, we need to have reliable transportation. But taking that even a step further, and I'm going to tie this together because I feel like all of these issues, they cannot just be looked at individually. So when you look at how can we reduce the amount of transportation that people need to do, I invite you to look at the Zuni Pueblo. And that's a place where I lived for 3 years. It's in New Mexico. In Zuni, if you're in the old village, you can do everything that you need to do on foot. So I taught at St. Anthony Indian School. I lived at the Teach-Ridge. I walked up the block to the library. I walked up the block the other way to get to the grocery store. I miss Helena Market. I miss the fried chicken, okay? So there were things that you could do. A huge problem that happened to the Zuni community is people stopped walking, and the diabetes rate skyrocketed. They were then able to use federal grants to be able to have a program now, it's called Healthy Lifestyles, where now they're bringing back the community involvement together. We played Healthy Lifestyles basketball games. I'm terrible at basketball. In fact, I'd be shooting baskets, and I would keep shooting at the hoop, and I couldn't do it, and they would just give me the ball again and again and again. Okay, so, but it was out there, we're having fun, we're developing relationships. So I've just got my 1 minute mark. So what else? Jarrett Walker study, that has already been put into place, or not put into place, that's already occurred, the study, so we can use the recommendations from there. I've talked before about a family pass, developing early young riders, making it affordable, more frequent routes. I've talked some in previous forums about in Oregon, where the routes come regularly. I've talked some about in Monterey, California, where they have a bus called the Wave, and it's completely free, and it's for the tourists who are able to come. Going with that, we've got free days for the cable car. Why don't we have some free days for Suntran to get people to know what that is like? We need to communicate with our bus company, with the drivers. We need to know what their needs are also. Living Streets Alliance, work with the Green Streets, PAG, and RTA. Talk with me afterwards, because 4 minutes is not a lot right here. All right, I'm not sure. Steve is next.
When 31% of the greenhouse gas emissions in Pima County are as a result of transportation, we obviously have to consider transportation as a major policy issue for this region. And that's a piece of data that PAG put out just last week. We lead by example in the city of Tucson. We funded a comprehensive operational analysis of our entire transit system 2 or 3 years ago. The result, we went through and studied route by route by route, hour by hour by hour, and picked up the ridership data. And as a result of that, we also integrated, Felicia, we have not only just referenced, but we have read and implemented much of the Jarrett Walker report, and in particular, the frequent transit network that we have now largely around the downtown core and the university area, because that's where the high ridership is. We are expanding that as necessary and as appropriate as we continue to study the ridership data. We're not going to walk away from that. We're talking a lot about buses, though. There is one person on the council who voted against the 150-foot wide 8-lane Broadway proposal that came out of the RTA, and that was me. The reason I did that was because, number one, it's a waste of $71 million of taxpayers' money. It does not take into consideration things such as building nodes and destinations that are walkable and bikeable from the residential areas immediately in the surrounding area. We are still working forward with that. I worked with the Rio Nuevo district to bring in a group called the Project for Public Spaces. They are internationally renowned in doing exactly that, is to take corridors and create destinations, create walkable and bikeable areas, and that's what we're doing right now, working with the Rio Nuevo district. So not only is the city involved in this, but we're bringing in elements from outside of the area who have expertise in these fields. So transportation is all modes of transport. It is buses, it is walking, it is biking. In addition to that, when you talk about infill development and density, you're talking about being family friendly, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and so people have destinations right in their neighborhood. You don't have to get in your car, you don't have to get on a bus to go, you walk into it. Project for Public Spaces is right now finalizing a draft of their report. I met with the chair of the Rio Nuevo Board last week. We're going to see that before the end of the quarter, and looking forward to moving forward with that. Paul also mentioned the issue of LID in terms of development. Green infrastructure is a huge piece of what we can do in the Broadway build out, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that as we go forward with that as well. Bike boulevards, I was the one who pushed on this council to get the speed limit reduced on bike boulevards by 5 miles per hour because the data demonstrates that if you are hit by a car, and Gary will validate this as a firefighter, your chances of survival are significantly greater the slower the cars are going. And so we have that implemented, and we're going to continue that build out of the bike boulevard system as funding comes available, and a lot of that is through the RTA. RTA is going to come back up for a reauthorization at some point. They must have a road repair component in it. I'm also hoping that they have that bike boulevard funding in it as well.
I absolutely agree with this principle that we should evolve our transportation systems so we all have access to safe, affordable, and clean. Currently, the city is doing a nice job with it, but we need to go further. The one principle I would support the city has been doing is remaining with the discounted fares for people with economic disadvantages, seniors, and disabled. That is one of the core reasons transportation exists, but for people who have no other choice but to use public transportation, and I will fight to protect that. Now, at the same time, we can do some changes. When we look at transportation, we need to look at how can we change with all these new road projects. We look at Grant Road. Yes, we need to change how, we need to add these extra lanes, but how do we minimize the impact of these extra lanes? New construction must include sidewalks, bike lanes, and even green spaces to minimize the impact of these wider roads. If we have that and we encourage other people to use things like the sidewalks and the bike lanes, transportation will flow much better. As well as with this new construction, I think the city can do a better job of using their competitive grants and awards to reward projects that include and integrate transportation into their new developments. People who want to bring and add transportation elements to new development should be rewarded for that, and that's how a lot of change will happen. As well as also focusing on hubs. A lot of people will ride their bikes, but they'll ride their bikes to a point, depending on where they live in town, to where they can take the bus or the streetcar. One of the best things about the streetcar is you can take your bike on it. So, you may not want to ride your bike all the way downtown, but if you can ride to UMC, you can take your bike on there and get to downtown. And the same thing goes with if you live on the east side and want to ride your bike part way, you can stop and take the bus by putting your bike in the front. That's a way to combine multiple types of transportation so people can get to where they need to go. In addition, with sidewalks, I think one of the big things is not only building sidewalks, but is having safe crosswalks. I think whenever we see an implementation of the new hawk lights, you see a much safer and used area. People will use the sidewalks if they're not afraid of crossing the streets or walking in the dark. And finally, how do we fix some of the internal bike routes? The loop is great, but the other day, my son and I tried to use the 3rd Street bike route, which I used all the time growing up. But now, at a certain point past Country Club, it's almost unusable, and the road was too bumpy for my son to use, and this is an established bike route. So we need to fix and maintain the bike routes that do exist, while also providing new ones in our new development.
Thank you. The final issue is relocalization and redevelopment. Those may not be familiar terms with everybody. They focus on us as opposed to more. So we'd like to ask for your comments on should we focus our economic development efforts on serving local people and local businesses and building local capacities? So Gary, if you'd start. What?
I was first this time.
Okay.
I'm going to duck the question.
Pretty clever. I agree with this principle. My goal is to make Tucson the most environmentally sustainable city in the Southwest. That's why I support my partner Philippe by helping out with the Tucson Community Supported Agriculture, Tucson CSA, which he founded in 2004. A CSA connects consumers directly with farmers to provide locally grown organic produce and other farm products. That's why I've declared the goal and plan of powering Tucson City government 100% on renewable energy by 2025. Tucson City government will lead by example, encouraging similar adoption of renewable energy in the private sector. The city's current policies are reasonable, but they need additional focus. My 100% goal will provide that focus. The next step is simple. Vote for me. If I'm elected, I'll push for a sustainable, solar-powered Tucson.
Relocalization and economic development. I'd like to challenge the audience here to think about the concept of the connection between disposable people, the way the system regards it, disposable people and the disposable environment. What do I mean by that? The status quo economy treats people as disposable. The status quo economy also treats the environment as disposable. All of us here share a goal of a sustainable future for Tucson. But we're not going to get there if we continue to ignore the connections between having a sustainable environment and having environmental justice, fighting environmental racism, having social and economic justice, having a fair and just economy that works for everyone in the community. My campaign is bringing a Green New Deal to Tucson. We're here to change the status quo storyline. I've alluded to this earlier. The old status quo storyline goes something like this. We bring in firms with taxpayer subsidies from the outside. Firms such as Caterpillar Company, Monsanto, Core Civic, etc. And I've already alluded to, dating back to the 1950s, the Hughes Aircraft Corporation. We've all seen this movie before. The storyline is that they exploit us by paying low wages. My campaign is proposing a $15 an hour minimum wage for all now. They contaminate our groundwater. They imprison our people for profit. The current city council voted $5 million to go to a group known as Core Civic. For those of you that don't know, that's a private prison. That's a private prison enterprise that contributes to mass incarceration, the school-to-prison pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. The old storyline destroys our environment, destroys our desert habitat, and these companies that we bring in from the outside, they ship their profits out of state after exploiting us. Here's the new storyline. Thousands of clean energy, fair wage jobs, retrofitting hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses with 3 different things. A, energy conservation. B, solar and renewable. 3, water harvesting and water conservation. Change is coming to Tucson. We will join half a dozen cities who've already pledged to go 100% renewable energy. And I've got a list of them here, but I see my time is up. Thank you.
Relocalization and economic redevelopment. Do I agree with that principle? Yes. Number 2, are current policies consistent with the principle? Sort of. And number 3, should the city be involved? How can it be involved? Yes, it should be involved. How can it be involved? So, I've started a couple forums, something that's personal, and I'll share it tonight too. So I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and if you look around the room, I want you to think about this stat. 1 out of 3 women and 1 out of 4 men will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. And so is there something that the city can do to help with that? Absolutely. Has the city had TPD have a domestic violence task force before? Yes, they did. In fact, Tucson used to have another group. Carolyn Clausen was a part of this, and it's not there anymore. The city can have funding go towards this. We can have conversations with Chief Magnus. We can help alleviate this this disease that is going on. The other things that I wanted to talk about too is how can we look at the economic redevelopment. We've talked before about having small businesses and having them able to be supported. We also have talked before about how we have incentives for large companies. We all talk about we hear about the Caterpillar incentives that went through. So I'm going to share some more personal stuff. I already told you I'm a member of Local First Arizona. I chose that I would be a member of that because they support the local economy. We talk about downtown Tucson, and we keep saying Jimmy Gibson's, Jerry Gibson's, Johnny Gibson's, thank you, is the only grocery store down there. What about the Food Conspiracy Co-op? Right? There are things that exist that we don't talk about. For whatever reason, I'm going to suggest that a lot of these things are stigmatized and we don't want to talk about them. Other things that we could look at, and some of these you might say, what is she talking about? Something that I will do as councilwoman is consider ideas that even if they sound outlandish, because that's what we need to do. And that's what I tell my students to do, dream big. And then you take those ideas and you figure out how to make them real. So there is a group that meets every once in a while, Tucson Solar Dollar. Thomas Greco is a part of that. It talks about creating a dollar that just the local companies, businesses would use, that the solar dollar is basically TEP would be using that to pay people, and there's more. I mean, so talk to me about that later. What else? Small business loans. So we could talk about how can we look at financing the money that we have that's invested in Wells Fargo, which we can talk about another time too, but how can we give that money to small businesses and help them? So again, I'm out of time. I invite you to have a conversation with me later. Thank you so much.
First of all, Mike, not one single person on the city council supports private prison industries, and to suggest that we've put $5 million into that industry is simply false. So I've heard you say that before. If you just stop it, you're going to sit up here, let the people know the truth. That is just absolutely false. We don't sit on the council and make binary decisions. We have to weigh a whole lot of different competing priorities. Is a local economy, are small businesses important to this economy? Absolutely they are. Every week in my newsletter I've got a local Tucson segment that I put in there. The reality, though, is that we have to have a mixed economy. The main driving economic factors, setting aside the local business community, which is essential, are the university and Davis Mountain and international commerce. We have to recognize the fact that a mixed economy is what makes everybody healthy in this community. Should we be supporting local businesses? Absolutely. I can't tell you the amount of time I spend working with the Downtown Tucson Partnership and the 4th Avenue Merchants Association. They're right in the heart of Ward 6. On making sure that they're being able to work through the local regulatory system as efficiently as possible. We put together an adaptive reuse ordinance so that we can get small businesses into existing buildings efficiently without having to bring the whole building back up to code. I worked for 3 years on getting what's called a safe harbor ordinance in place, and so that we can protect and preserve small businesses while major road construction projects are affecting the customers' ability to get to them. We are also supportive now of the 2030 district. I'm a little surprised Paul didn't mention that because he's a member of it. 2030 district is an important piece of our local economy, not only in terms of the localization, but also in terms of energy efficiency in the environment. Absolutely supportive of PACE legislation. I've been working with a representative out of northern Arizona. PACE legislation is something that will allow small businesses to not have to put forward a capital outlay in order to put together energy efficient amenities in their buildings going forward. The pushback on that has been from the banking industry. I'm told by a guy up in northern Arizona right now, in Flagstaff area, that the banking industry has agreed to stand down, not to support it, but at least not to oppose it. So we have a chance for that in this upcoming legislative session. Next steps, change the state legislature. We have to recognize the fact that we lost a suit by the Goldwater Institute because this city council was proactive and tried to put into place incentives for local purchasing. Goldwater Institute took us to task, and we had to back away from it. So as soon as we get the state legislature changed, and we will have a better opportunity to get some of the ordinances and statutes in place. Sorry, I guess my time's up anyway, right? Statutes in place that will allow us to implement home rule decisions that will help to incentivize small local businesses more effectively than we can right now.
Absolutely, I agree with this principle. We have to focus our economic development efforts on the local citizens and the local businesses. I mean, I say this not only as a member of Ward 3, but as the owner of a small business myself in Ward 5. I can see the difference a successful local business does for a community, not only for its employees, but the neighborhoods around it. Now, the city has done a good job with developing downtown, and it's a great start. But where I would differ from the city is take the model of downtown and start expanding it to the rest of the city. It's very needed. Now, I look at Ward 3. It's full of diverse and very eclectic cultures and neighborhoods. But there's a wide variety of economic needs and some really neat areas that are ripe for economic development. That's why I've been pushing for a Ward 3 economic plan, which will encourage the neighborhoods and businesses to work together to marshal the resources to become successful instead of competing. That's where we run into a problem, is all these different neighborhoods and different businesses seem to be competing for resources when they should be sharing and benefiting from their mutual success. Now, how can we do that? When we look at an economic plan, we need to look for, do we have enough people to work? We need to develop our own job base. Not only to have call center jobs, but we need to provide services and connect people with tools to increase their skill level. They don't need just to be working minimum wage level jobs. They need to be able to increase their vocation and become a higher level of skill so they can benefit from higher wages. Also, we need to look at smart infill. In Ward 3, there's a lot of older buildings, vacant lots. Well, we need to encourage development of those areas, but not just mini dorms or brand new big shopping centers. We need to have smart infill that fits with the culture of the neighborhoods. If you look at Ward 3, especially around the Mountain and Park and Glen areas, there have been 3 new developments that fit within the realm of true infill. The solar lofts in the corner of Mountain and Glen are fantastic and a great addition to the community, as well as some really neat housing built by Pepper Viner, which is not going to lead to gentrification, but fits within a price point for people in the community and are energy efficient. In addition to this, we need to make sure the existing businesses have the support of the city. When it comes time to expand or grow your building or your business, the city needs to show all the support, whether from code enforcement to helping them work on the regulations. I have a client, we just put a fence in. He took 3 trips downtown in the span of 2 days because he just couldn't get the permit right. We need to find ways to make sure people have the ability to improve themselves, and the city can do that. And finally, one of the areas in terms, especially in sustainability, we really need to focus on is energy use for people who aren't participating. 60% of Ward 3 is not owner-occupied. So how do you reach those people to become more energy efficient, to provide not only affordable housing, but livable housing? Just because you only pay $500 doesn't mean you should live in something that isn't up to code. So the city has an obligation in the future to reach out to the people who aren't participating and make sure they're part of the solution.
So I've said throughout my campaign as we've had these forums, small business is the backbone of Tucson. Close to 80% of the people that work in Tucson work in small business in one way or another. Small business is more likely to protect the things we're here talking about tonight with sustainability because they care about the city more than someone that's a larger corporation with multiple areas. So small business is the backbone and it should be the priority of our city council. I believe the city council's primary function when it comes to small business is to be a bridge between government service and small business and entrepreneurs. Thank you, Tom, for leading right into it. There is a solution when we have a lot of small businesses that can't navigate the codes and the permitting requirements, because you need a law degree to read half of those. We just redid the sign ordinance, and it's better, but it's still confusing when you try to read it. And a small business owner that's trying to focus on their product needs help with that. So one thing I wanted to do is build a small business council within the city, and with that we'll have what's called jump teams. Jump teams are something that have worked around other cities in the nation. You'll take members from several different departments in the city. They work together. When a small business comes in, whether it's for a relocation or for a new business to start up, that jump team will work exclusively with them to help them navigate all the government red tape, all the processes for licensing, permitting, to work with that business owner from start to finish to help them navigate that process. That's what the city should be doing to support the small business that supports our community. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I teach at JTED, and for those of you who don't know, JTED is a career and technical education school. We take high school students and prepare them for the workforce. We pride ourselves in our EMT program that my wife started, that we put our students out in the community. During the Veterans Day Parade, our students in their first semester of school are providing first aid for the entire event. We make them wear shirts and red backpacks and interact with the people. So they're able to walk up to you, look you in the eye, shake your hand, and introduce themselves to you. That's something you don't find with most high school students. They've spent 18 years being told to sit there, be quiet, and do what we tell you. Now we expect them to walk into a business and be able to run a cash register as soon as they graduate high school. About 60% of the high school graduates are going to attempt to go to college, and less than 40% of them are going to actually graduate college. Those people need jobs, and a lot of that comes from the small business in Tucson. We need to increase our trades, our skilled professions. Public safety is a great opportunity. The restaurants we have downtown, JTED provides a lot of those programs that we can partner to provide that workforce. When we start talking about bringing businesses in from the outside, a lot of what they're looking for is a safe community first, a quality education for the people they bring in for their families, and then they're looking for a qualified workforce and capital to be invested. We have some of those, but we can continue to improve on that, and those are some things I want to bring to City Council.
Well, those are the three basic questions that we'd ask the candidates to address, but there's one more that's really important, and that is that the city doesn't do any of these things alone. It partners with the county, whether it wants to or not. It partners with the people, hopefully it wants to. And so the final question is, how will you work with the county, and how will you work with the people to make these things happen? Mike, I believe you're up next.
The Cease for City Council is a people's campaign, so I'm pleased that you asked that question. Yes, of course, intergovernmental relations are certainly an important factor in the role of a city council person. We work with people on the city council, work with county, state, and federal, and that's an important part of the role. I would like to focus on the people that aren't here tonight attending this forum, the people that have been left behind by the system. And my campaign would like to work with those people. Thank you.
So my motto on my original slogan was, each of us, all of us are Tucson. So how will we work with the public, and how will we work with the county, and are those important? Absolutely. Some things that I have been doing already, I've had a chat with Chew, which is kind of regular ongoing thing where people can come and bring questions or concerns that they have and things that they would like to see. So I've talked also before about having a 24/7 available kind of a phone. For those of you who don't know, I am a victim advocate for the Pima County Attorney's Office. And something that we do is we're available. So if somebody has a crisis, we have a response team that goes. Now, to you, it might not be a crisis, something that happens, but you might not know who to call. You can just call the Ward 3 office. That would be fantastic. They would be able to point you out into the city resources and things. The other thing that I feel that we can really support with the public and with the county and with the city as a whole is different kinds of networking. So we have resources available to us. Jefferson Park neighborhood, I'm going to give a huge shout out to. When somebody moves into their area, they have this fantastic resource that they give them. It's a welcome packet. It's really expensive to make. So how can the city have something like that online on the website that we already have that exists so that people can use that as a resource? With the county, it's a little trickier. We've got RTA that basically, we have one of the votes out of, I can't remember if it's 7 or 11, Steve would know the answer to that one. But when we have only one vote and we're looking at how can we make transit better for us here in Tucson, people who are not in Tucson necessarily, they don't understand the needs that we have. So as councilwoman, I will communicate with and advocate for and amplify our voices. Thank you.
In a recent Jarrett Walker blog post, he wrote this with respect to cities. It functions for anyone only if it functions for almost everyone. That is so totally, brutally obvious that it's unavoidable. We don't just work with the county. We work with the county, the state, the flood control district, the Army Corps of Engineers, lower basin states, the federal government, the tribes. We work with multiple jurisdictions. When I said in the last answer that we don't just make binary decisions, we make complex decisions that have to juggle a lot of different facts. These aren't hobbies that we're all applying for up here. These are serious positions that are going to affect people's quality of life. And so, yes, we're working with multiple jurisdictions. With respect to the public, just yesterday we stood up again the Commission on Climate, Energy, and Sustainability. It's going to be a multifaceted commission that's going to engage the general public in the issues we're talking about here tonight. So yes, the public has to be involved. We have boards and committees and commissions that touch on everything from bicycling to pedestrians to planning commission to zoning examiners issues. We have 65 of them. Right now we're going through the whole list of them trying to make sure that they're much more efficient so we're not just simply wasting people's time. One of the comments I made at the council meeting yesterday was that we were presented with a proposal by the city manager that was so ambiguous it was to be as to meaningless, and I took the position that we're not going to set up this new committee that he was proposing until we get offered some specificity to it. Because when we ask people to invest their time in the community, we have to make sure that that time which is voluntarily given is well spent. We did wind up giving direction, though, yesterday to the city manager to set up an integrated transit task force that not only includes buses and multimodal ways of getting around, but also land use decisions that people make so that we are creating destinations, walkable, bikeable destinations as community nodes throughout this city. As the Ward 3 candidates have been talking about, this, every ward has these nodes and people don't want to have to get in their car, get in a bus and drive somewhere to go to a store. That's what we're working on in the city of Tucson. We're doing it with boards, committees, commissions, and the general public.
Yeah, the city has to work with the region around it. If the reality is transportation doesn't end at River Road, the city must be responsible for its own transportation, but it'd be foolish not to try to incorporate the municipalities around us, because that way we'll have more people using what we're trying to work for. But at the end of the day, the city needs to be advocating for what the people want. And that is where I think will make a real big difference. Steve was talking about this new integrated transit committee. Well, if you look at the people on that committee, there's some wonderful groups, whether it's the Disability Commission or Living Streets Alliance, but what you don't have on there are actual just people, the neighborhoods. And what I think that's the one step the city needs to go even further is to reach out and engage the people who aren't participating already. It's great to have people who want to be involved, but what we're missing, especially in Ward 3, because there's a low level of participation from a lot of different neighborhoods, because people have to work and are stressed and have other things they need to do. The Ward 3 office has to reach out to those people and engage them and give them the tools to participate. That includes keeping the ward office in the ward, not moving it downtown. That includes being more consistent with neighborhood associations. That means creating neighborhood associations where some don't exist or are dormant. We can't, if we're going to have a regional approach, if we're going to have a collaborative approach, the only way we can have one is if people are participating. And it's great to see events like tonight because everybody here is very engaged, but the reality is most people aren't. And whether it's because they're too busy or don't feel their vote counts, it's our responsibility to reach out to them. And that's where the city will make the difference. Commissions are great. You know, I participated in the Parks and Rec Commission for Ward 3, the Small Business Commission for Ward 3, and I felt my voice was heard. But I'm the minority. We need to have more people who believe their voice is being heard, and I think we can be very successful with that.
So one of the tenets of my campaign, you'll see on my palm cards in the back, is a regional approach to all the problems that we have and the challenges we have in Tucson. Tucson will always be the cultural hub of Southern Arizona. However, we have some wonderful cities around us in Marana, Oro Valley. Sal Rita is one of the fastest growing cities in the state. And then Pima County that encompasses all of that. By working together, building partnerships to build more business, more homes, better roads, make Southern Arizona a better destination as a whole, Tucson is going to prosper. Just like everyone up here has said, we don't do it by ourselves. The city's not had a great history of working with these other areas. Tucson is only, or Pima County is only 64%, I believe it is, incorporated. There's still a lot of unincorporated area. Rather than working together, we've been fighting with each other to see who's going to incorporate. It's still some of the Old West fighting over land problems. Maricopa County actually had a great project where they worked together to get rid of the unincorporated area. It brought additional funding in. That would bring additional funding into the state if we could work with our neighboring partners, whether it's the cities, fire districts, Pima County, to make sure that we incorporate all that area, bring that back to Tucson. As far as working with the citizens, my first priority is the people that elected me, tell me what you need done. I'm going to come to you, I'm going to ask you what you need. Tucson has about 56 committees currently that oversee everything. One of the first things I want to do is sit down with the Ward 3 representatives on those committees and find out, how are you being treated? Are you being listened to? Are your needs being met by city council and by city government? That's how we get back to the people. Committees are a great tool for community involvement. That allows you to have a say in the government, but it only works as well as if the city council is actively working with those groups, providing direction to them, providing the leadership, and then following through with the recommendations those committees bring forward. So that'd be the first place I would focus to make sure we got back to community government and back to involvement.
There have been some frictions in the past between the city and the county, and I will do everything I can to resolve those, to have a better working relationship between the city and the county. It's just plain silly that the city and the county can't cooperate more, and I'm going to make that one of my goals. I will work with the public. Excellent organizations like Sustainable Tucson. Tucson is full of healthy organizations like Sustainable Tucson, and it's a real strength of our community. I will work with all of the cities in the Pima Association of Governments. The reauthorization of the RTA is an opportunity to improve it. And the Ward 3 office will reach out, if I'm elected, to all aspects of the community, all organizations, any member of the public who has perspective, knowledge, or expertise on an issue before the council, including sustainability.
Well, those are the questions that about 60 people spent over 200 hours to develop, and I hope that they were informative to you. But they're not the only questions. And so we've collected a number of questions, many more than we're going to be able to ask. But the first question, I think, goes to the people that this is really all about. I'd like to ask the representative of Changemaker High School to start with the audience questions.
We haven't picked them all up just by this area.
Okay, well,
Might pick my question up, so sorry.
You guys have about a minute, please.
Speed round.
So something the students here noticed so far is that this whole debate has been taken from an economic privileged point of view. What we want to know is, okay, sorry. Okay, so what the students have noticed so far is that this whole debate has been taken from an economics privileged point of view. What we really want to know is what about those of us who are from a lower socioeconomic standpoint when our biggest concern is just surviving right now.
So proud of Changemaker High School students for coming up with their question and being able to ask it. So what about the people who aren't able to achieve those things that we're talking about? People like me, who I'm a single mom, I've been a teacher, I don't have a huge income. Like I said, there are many things that I want to do that I can't do. In fact, when I was at Mansfeld, I tried to help our school because our courtyard would always flood during lunchtime when it rained, and the kids could not play basketball out there. So Watershed Management Group had this great school grant, and in fact, that is why I came here and I met Oscar, and we were in his classroom and we talked about it. And I went back to my school so excited and I said, hey, we've got this grant that we could use. The response was no. Sorry, Felicia. One, you don't even know if you're gonna be back here, because I told them I was running for city council. Two, how are we going to man this? How are we going to power this up? So, yes, we need to address that, and those are the conversations that I have with people who volunteer for me right now. We're poor people, we're working people. They volunteer for me because they can't give me money. So we are walking for these issues exactly. Thank you.
The whole notion of, where did you go? Underlying your question is as to accessibility. City of Tucson, everybody on the mayor and council, and I have heard nothing from any of the candidates here that would indicate that that's going to change, is absolutely committed to the low-income bus fares that we have, is absolutely committed to the incentives that we have built in for low-income access to all of the kinds of environmental appliances, whether that be rainwater or gray water, all those harvesting, so that they are accessible, and so that, as Felicia was indicating earlier, people can reach out and not have to make a huge capital outlay to access them. We have fully supportive things such as incentivizing community gardens, fully supporting the urban farming ordinance that we just passed last year. So accessibility is the underlying principle in what you're describing, and this city council has been committed to that ever since I started back in 2009. You're gonna have to ask it through him. I don't mind.
Can I see the mic real quick, please? Well, we've got a whole bunch of other questions.
Oh, Betty.
Okay. Would you like to?
They'll let you. They're gonna let you.
So, I mean, I understand all that, but what about the people who don't have houses, who live on the streets, who don't make even the bare minimum to raise a family of kids? Like, I'm pretty sure all you guys have kids, a good house, cars, food always on the table. What about people who can't, provide for the family? What then?
We are a blue dot in a red state. We would pass a whole lot more in terms of local ordinances that will allow us to address that kind of a question as soon as the state legislature gets their foot off our throat and stops adopting statutes that affect home rule. We have, last year there were 14, Felicia, take your fly back. We had 14 bills in the last legislative session alone that directly impacted our ability to make local decisions that I believe, and we're actually at the state Supreme Court right now fighting a couple of them that affect our ability to answer the question that you have. So I think a lot of the answer to your question is change the constituents up the elements of the state legislature, and we'll have a whole lot of better ability to address those kinds of things locally.
That's a really hard question because it's real. I understand when I was 9, we had to move 3 states away and live with my grandmother because my mom and I had nowhere else to go. She didn't have a job and hadn't gone to school. So it's hard when you have nowhere else to go, and how do you make something of yourself? This city, I believe, has been very supportive of people, but the reality is I don't think everybody knows what is out there to help them. When you're too busy trying to find a place to live or go to school or just find work, you don't have the time to go and find the resources. And Steve's right, there's a lot of accessibility, but if you don't know about it, how's it gonna help you? And I think that's where the city has to step forward, is to find the local organizations like the Salvation Army or Youth on Their Own, the different people that can help the people who need help that the city can't always do it. It's a community effort, and it's not gonna happen overnight, but the reality is we all have to work together to do it.
So that's a great question that actually matters to me a lot. From the JTED perspective, when I started there, I didn't know what it was. And as I started getting involved, we have a lot of our students come from exactly what you're talking about. They're looking for something other than go to college. They don't want to go to college. They're looking for a job. We really run the programs there as a hand up, not a handout. Teach them employability skills, give them opportunities. One thing that I want to expand on from that is internship and apprenticeship programs, so that we do have an opportunity for when you graduate high school or get a GED, whatever works for you, you have the skills to move into some sort of a job so you can start making a livable wage. That also goes along with, once you have a livable wage and that employability, then you can start looking at more affordable housing, better situations. We work with a lot of those troubled youth. There are resources out there, but they're not accessible. So I do believe that there's a lot we can do. I want to reach out to the youth to help them with that and really increase that availability. The other thing, we lost $1 million in funding at JTED that was for our post-grads. People that graduated high school decided, hey, I need something more in my life, and they weren't able to come back. So we're trying to regain that as well, to bring someone that's anywhere age 19 to 22 back into those programs so we can get them in the workforce.
The question was premised with the statement that this whole debate the whole forum has been from an economically privileged standpoint. I disagree. I talked about making rainwater harvesting accessible to low and moderate income families. Everybody here has talked about keeping transit affordable for low and moderate income riders. You know, I've noticed that when when Tucson has a problem, that problem is bigger in Ward 3. It's also bigger in Ward 5. I have said to Councilmember Fimbres that I want to work with him in every way that he is now partnering with Karen Ulick. I've been attending meetings of the homelessness task force that he started and he partnered with Karen on. You know, on a day recently, I was starting my canvassing, my knocking on doors, and the first house on my list was accompanied by 3 police cars, and the members of that house were being hauled away in handcuffs. I said, well, scratch that house off my list.
That was a joke? That sums it up. That sums it up.
That really happened.
No, that sums it up. You just don't get what they're asking you. It sums it up. You're totally not, none of you guys really get what they're talking about because you're coming from that place of privilege. You're not recognizing what they're saying to you. And that joke right there sums up how clueless you are. So thanks.
Like, I don't know, I get that you guys think you guys come from, you guys are all privileged. I'm not gonna lie. You guys have a house, you guys pay for your own stuff. You guys probably had struggles in the past, but you've never really, had to probably be homeless, sleep on the streets for days, weeks, months at a time, years probably. There's kids here in this school who's going through that or gonna be going through that. So what I don't get is the comment you just made is completely pretty bad. Like, I've been in houses like that because, my family was here not doing the right stuff, and probably illegal stuff, but I mean, that's just, there's really no need for comments like that in general, and it just doesn't really make any sense. And when you're talking about the buses, since, all the buses, yes, the fare has gone up, which doesn't really help a lot of people who don't have that money to do that. So I don't understand how you guys didn't say it's more.
Since I've been directly attacked, I'd like a brief response.
Oh, is that attack? Is that attack?
My sister died at age 42 from complications of alcoholism. I've seen problems firsthand, way too close.
My cousin got shot in the head at violence like that. That's struggles. Alcohol is because you're on
I think it's clear that there are problems that the city has to deal with that affects people's lives.
Can I speak, Trace? Can I speak to this question briefly? Okay. I agree with the question. I personally come from privilege. I have a privileged background. The core principle of my campaign, as I mentioned earlier, is for us to connect the dots here. This isn't just about environmental sustainability. We all support environmental sustainability. This is about connecting with the people that are viewed by the system, by the status quo, as disposable, as left behind. And this is part of what I'm asking everyone to think about, that we're not going to have environmental sustainability until we draw the connection between environmental sustainability and social justice, and fight against environmental racism, and fight for social and economic justice. And one of the things my campaign is proposing, among others, and I only have limited time, 15 seconds, is a $15 an hour minimum wage for all. And that's a start. It's not a panacea, but that's a start on an economy that's fair and just and works for everyone, and not just for the top 1%.
Well, he asked a follow-up question, so thank you for asking the follow-up question. And I'm going to share a story about when I taught in California. So there was a skateboard that was used in a fight, and so the principal ended up banning skateboards from the school. What he wasn't thinking about was how some of those kids use that skateboard for transportation to get to school. So basically, he was saying, you can't come to school anymore. So there are issues, and I hear what you're saying, and I thank you so much for speaking up, and I thank Changemaker here for having our students question and ask. And I think I'm gonna really miss teaching when I get elected, because these are the kinds of conversations that I have in my classrooms. And these are the kinds of conversations that as councilwoman I would bring to our community that we would be having. Because you are absolutely 100% right. There are resources that we can keep saying they're there, but it's great, but we can't reach them. I talked about it at the Living Streets Alliance Forum, which is available on my website. You can click on the link under events and recordings. So there was a lot that came out in that too. The safety pin that people wanted to wear, it was a nice gesture, but it wasn't really helping solve the problem. Okay, thanks.
Well, we got about, 20 or so questions, of which we narrowed, I was given about 7, or about 10 rather, and I've narrowed them down to the top 7, and we're not going to get through all of those. So we'll start here, and you get this one. I understand that the City Council is planning water infrastructure to bring new businesses at taxpayers' expense. If this appears to contradict the city's stated goal of sustainable development, please comment. Okay, I'm not doing it closely enough. Should I read the question again? Yeah. Okay. I understand that the City Council is planning to provide infrastructure to bring for water infrastructure to bring new businesses at taxpayers' expense. If this appears to contradict the city's stated goal of sustainable development, please comment.
Actually, we had this conversation last night at the council meeting, and we continued that item in order to build more green incentives and more sustainable incentives into what was on the table at the time it came to us. This was a mayor and manager's recommendation. It is tied to what we call our primary jobs incentive program. Those jobs will have to pay in excess of $50,000, $52,000. So we're not talking about service sector jobs. We're talking about major jobs that will be in largely the logistics and transportation industry out around the Tucson International Airport. There is a gift clause analysis that any of these positions will have to go through, which means that we have to assure that the taxpayers are getting back more than what the incentive is offered. So this is not a giveaway to private business coming in. There's a constitutional requirement that we make sure the taxpayers are made whole and then some before this is even in place. But we did not adopt it last night. We asked the manager to take his time, bring this back to us when we have enough incentive built into it to make sure that the infrastructure is going to have conservation incentives built in.
Yeah, Steve said it pretty well. I mean, there is a lot of, some incentives are required. The thing to know about this water incentive is that it's not a carte blanche for everybody who applies. They automatically will get money if they qualify. There's a cap on how much can be given out annually, and you also have to qualify. It's a sliding scale, like Steve said. The more you bring to the community in terms of jobs and conservation, the more you'll qualify. But not everybody who applies can get it, and it's a limited number of dollars that can be distributed. So I think it's a very fair way to attract people.
Okay, one thing, everyone is entitled to answer the question, but you don't have to. That would get us more questions.
I believe that any of the tax incentives or any incentives we give to any business have to make sense before we do them. We have to take care of the local businesses first. So I haven't got the background on this that Steve does. Obviously, I wasn't part of the executive sessions or gone through it. But I do believe that we need to look internally first, provide for our local businesses, and then if we do have something that brings in outside business, it does have to be at a tax neutral or an incentive or increase to the taxpayers of Tucson.
I'll just add one brief thing. I really liked the concept behind Councilmember Cunningham's proposal that the aid, the water infrastructure be conditioned on certain water efficiency measures being adopted by the new business. Seems like a good idea.
Without getting into the weeds, so to speak, on this issue, I'd just like to state that the Cease campaign strongly opposes privatization of our water. Thank you.
Woo! So when the Star wrote about the article, I think we had a forum that day, and I was really mad, and my campaign said, Felicia, stay focused. So I didn't talk about it then, but I am pleased to hear that it did not get approved.
Next question. How do you plan on making transportation easier for people without cars? Do you plan on adding more bus stops, or do you have another idea in mind? Tom? How do you plan on making transportation easier for people without cars? Do you plan on adding more bus stops, or do you have another idea in mind?
Well, of course, the number of bus routes is key. You want as many people to ride the bus as possible. But what's just as important is people being able to get to the bus stop themselves. There's on my street, just north of my street, is Roger Road. And on the north side of the street is a bus stop that's not accessible by any sidewalk, any crosswalk, no shade structure, no light, and there's not even a shoulder of the road. And it's on an uneven grade going up to the campus farms. How we want people to use a bus stop when if you have any sort of mobility impairment or a wheelchair, if you're just old and slow and take your time, you're not going to use that bus stop. So in order for us to have a really good, effective bus stop, people have to feel safe and accessible. That's the best way to do it.
I wish I could tell you I had a perfect answer for that, but I think it's just about continuing to evaluate what we have, look for efficiencies in the routes, look for the most popular routes, making sure we have enough coverage on those routes, providing for safe bus stops and safe passageways to the bus stops. I think we also need to continue to look at alternative modes of transportation, partnering with Suncat. They have some great routes that are through the U of A. Look at partnering with our neighbors in Pima County and Marana to try to expand some of the routes to the north as well. Utilize some of our larger malls, Tucson Mall, particularly in Ward 3, as a hub for those buses so you have a safe place to wait for the bus where you could be indoors. So we just need to continue to look at efficiencies and find better ways to do it.
When I go out knocking on doors, I do it on my bicycle, and I've been, during the especially hot days, I've noticed people at bus stops roasting in the full sun. It's painful. So Suntran is improving its bus shade structures at bus stops, but let's continue that. And you know, Gary said it well. There's no magic solution. We just have to keep pushing to have the best transit system we possibly can.
Just briefly, the question is larger than just adding more bus routes. Yes, support adding more bus routes, but we need to look at this in a fundamentally different way. Transportation is a basic necessity, and we should provide this a clean energy transportation for all members of the community as something. We should think of it like, we shouldn't challenge like how we're going to fund this. We don't ask those sort of questions about how are we going to fund fire and police services. It's a basic necessity, and we need to provide it for all members of the community. Free, yes.
So the question was transportation, making it easier for people without cars, more bus stops, or other ideas. So I think we also need to look at alternative forms of transportation. Bus obviously will get us from point A to point B. Earlier I talked about tying this into the economic redevelopment. Having infill, when we look at things like the Oracle Area Revitalization Project, having the businesses that are closer to us so folks don't have to go so far. With that said, we have started already the bike share program that's going, so getting people more involved with that, supporting Bicus with the work that they're trying to do with that. Also, I was over at the farmers market volunteering, and the gentleman stopped me and he said, "Excuse me, do you know where the bike air pump is?" And I was like, I don't know, I had to find Parker. But we need to have tools that are available out there for people to use. So we have service centers for cars. They can gas up, they can fill up their air tires, they can do all those things, but we don't have anything for bicycles. More shade trees so that when we're walking from point A to point B, that we're not sweltering in the heat, which then also has the side benefit of bringing down our air temperatures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
We actually do have conversations about how to fund police and fire and roads. In fact, we just got done having a very major one in this community about in May, when by a 62 to 38% margin, the community said, yes, let's do the half-cent sales tax that sunsets in 5 years to do exactly that. So those that's correct. That's exactly, those are the data.
Yeah, but you said
so let me finish, because the clock is moving. How do we make these more accessible? We just, as I mentioned earlier, did a comprehensive operational analysis that went route by route, street by street, hour by hour. As a result of that, we have instituted a frequent transit network throughout this community. We're going to continue to expand on that as the data continues to come in, and we have the money, which is a key part of this. Let's not pretend that money doesn't count in this conversation, because it does. And as the dollars come in, as the data comes in, we're going to continue to expand on that. As Felicia said, though, land use development decisions are key to this, so that we can create walkable and bikeable destinations, modes that are accessible to people from their neighborhoods and from their homes.
It is almost 8 o'clock, and I've still got 4 or 5 questions here, 5 questions, 6 questions. So what I'm going to do is read one more, and then we'll decide if we want to go further. Tucson is a UNESCO World City of Gastronomy based on over 4,000 years of culinary food crops. How can the city promote this and ensure we have local capacity to continue this agrarian heritage?
I actually just read an article on that in one of the magazines I was looking at the station, talking about the great culture of Tucson, and it's considered one of the top food cities. Tucson needs to do a better job of promoting ourselves as a destination. Coming here for our food, it is unique, it is a great way to promote the city, but it's just one of the many things we have here. We could promote so much more with our entire culture. We have the whole Southwest is based out of Tucson. So the culinary side of it, we do have a lot of opportunities where we could expand on that, continue to make it bigger. I'm concerned with our downtown economy being so based on all the new restaurants there. I'd like to see some additional anchor businesses to help support that. But overall, the city needs to promote anything we can do. We have put those into more of an area where they're cultured together. It brings people down, but it's not the best thing about Tucson. It's just one of our history pieces.
Tucson is a UNESCO City of Gastronomy, not because we have fancy restaurants. It's because of the local character of our food, the local character of our diet. I'm kind of famous for, among many of my friends, for my prickly pear lemonade, which I harvest every summer. And it's that quality, that diversity, that harvesting food from the desert that makes us special.
Sadly, I'd like to say that I think, unfortunately, this question represents the privilege bias that this gentleman brought up earlier.
Right on.
And that's unfortunate. That being said, which I'm concerned about the privilege bias of the question at all. There is a really long-term, really good organization here in Tucson. Most of you know about it. It's called Native Seed Search, and it does support the heritage of native seeds. Thank you.
So I think it's great that we have that designation and that status. And so now how do we bridge that gap and how do we make it inclusive for all of us? So I've talked before about having community gardens. I've talked a couple times, and I'm going to throw her in front in the spotlight again. Jana and her husband Dan has showed up, by the way, now too. They have this blog, and they write about how we can take that purslane, how we can take that amaranth, how we can take these local crops that we have. We are in a desert community where we can do that. Barrio Bread, he ends up having his wheat sourced locally. He has found wheat that is drought tolerant, that doesn't use a lot of water, and it can grow here. And these are the kinds of things that we can do as just ordinary people. And in fact, it's kind of dark now, but you'll have to come back and you will have to go and see the work that the students here at Changemaker have done with their community garden. It's amazing. It's amazing. And if you have not seen it, you need to see it. If you have not been to a local farmer's market lately, you need to go. Thank you.
Trish, reread that question.
Tucson is a UNESCO World Cities of Gastronomy based on our 4,000 years of culinary food crops. How can the city promote this and ensure we have local capacities to continue this agrarian heritage?
Well, we are promoting it. We're promoting it through Visit Tucson. We're marketing it all over the country and all over the world. It's an investment that we make into our marketing arm as a result of the $4 million we put into that entity every year. We're over half of their budget. Visit Tucson's who markets us, so we're doing it. But in addition to that, I would just suggest that it's not just about being a city of gastronomy. I mentioned earlier that we're investing heavily in incentivizing community gardens. We're also doing the work. We've already done the work with the urban farming. You know, that's not the city of gastronomy. It speaks to the second part of the question: is how do we make ourselves more resilient locally and internally, with giving people the opportunity to produce their own food locally.
I think it's really important to support local agrarian efforts. The ability for people to grow their own food or raise their own chickens to feed and supply themselves is important. You know, when the city considered limiting people's ability to raise chickens in their backyard, there was a big to do about it, because it's important for people to be able to produce their own food. And we can support those people raising their own food by going to CSAs and by shopping and buying those products locally. The second way to help people is, as a city, Felicia brought up Don Guerrera at Barrio Foods. I became friends with Don when he was selling bread out of the back of his truck at my son's school. And now he's evolved, and now he has his own shop every day. That is another way the city can promote the agrarian community and the UNESCO designation, is by supporting the local people who are trying to develop their restaurants and grow them using local products.
Well, it is just a minute or two short of 8 o'clock, and so what I'd like to do now is to have the candidates wrap up with the things that they want to tell you to leave with. Please repeat that.
Do you want me to go first? Go ahead.
So in Ward 3, that's the ward that I'm running for, the median income in Tucson is $37,000. The median income in Ward 3 is $27,000. As as a single mother, as a teacher, I understand the needs of the families there, because those are the people that I worked with every day. Families trying to make ends meet, families who have dreams and visions, and we need to be able to have the courage now to help with those. So as a victim advocate, as a teacher, as a mother, I understand how to work with folks to help them speak up. And when they're not able to, I will amplify their voices. How long do we have, Trace?
Just 1 minute.
Okay, he's like, it's your time. So I'm going to end with my English teacher pun, which is that the ballots are coming, and they're coming soon. So when you receive your ballot, please remember, my name's Felicia Chew, right? Okay, choose the right candidate. Da-dum-bum.
Thank you. I just want to say one thing. We have a whole lot of questions that we weren't able to get to. We will pass those on to the candidates, and if they have any answers for any of them, we'll post them on the Sustainable Tucson website. Steve.
Thank you for caring enough about this community to carve out the time and show up here tonight for a couple of hours. It's fundamentally important that we have community engagement. We have a good story to tell in the city of Tucson. Irrespective of what we hear from Phoenix, the state legislature, and from the Trump administration, we have a good story to tell here. This city council has invested fundamentally in major infrastructure with respect to the environment that we've been talking about here today. We offer incentives to low-income folks all over this community. We are absolutely supportive of PACE legislation to make sure that capital investment up front is not a barrier to people getting involved in any kind of environmental amenity that is available in the open market. So we have a good story to tell. I want to invite you, though, to pay attention to arguments that are going to be coming up that we are engaging in at the city council level. I'm going to give you one quick example. We have people within the city bureaucracy who consider our major streets as, quotes, navigable waterways, and so we are prevented by our city attorneys right now from doing things like offering incentives for curb cuts that go onto private property, because they say that we are prevented from doing that by law by what's called prior appropriation. Get involved when you see that discussion happening locally, because I guarantee you it's going to be coming within the very next couple of weeks.
This whole election is about participating. I've been in Ward 3 for over 30 years. There isn't anything I haven't seen or experienced in that ward. And when we talk about solutions, we talk about things that are happening, all my answers, all my solutions are from a first-person perspective. We talk about transportation, I've had to rely on the bus. We talk about having to use social agencies, I've had to use them. We talk about working with education. I help run my son's school for special needs. I've done these things. So when we talk about getting people involved and listening to them, I understand, I get it, and that's why I want to make a difference.
Some water. So I'm running as an independent candidate because I don't believe the Democrats or the Republicans have all the answers. I think the answers come from us all sitting down together, having a discussion, finding what the best solution is for the city of Tucson. Tucson is faced with a lot of challenges, and we need to prioritize those. We talk about transportation at every one of these forums. Yes, it's a challenge for Tucson, but it's not even our #1 challenge. We need to sit down and prioritize what those are. That's what I want to bring to City Council. I want to sit down, prioritize them, find solutions. Not continue to talk about them, but start taking actions to fix them. First and foremost for me is public safety. We did have to pass the Prop 101 just to provide for our police and fire. We need to do more than that. By making a safe community, we help take care of some of these other problems. Then we can start building on those solutions to take care of the next problem. We have to prioritize these. We need real solutions and stop talking about the issues and actually do something about them.
I've been living and breathing sustainability since I moved to Tucson in 2004. Now, I know I talk about Donald Trump a lot, but that's because he is a direct threat to Tucson's progressive democratic values. A friend was joking with me the other day. He said, Paul's going to build a preschool and he's going to make the children pay for it. Tom said on Jim Ninsel's Zone of Politics TV show that he checked into putting solar on his own home and that he couldn't afford it. Tom didn't do his homework. The average size of a residential system is 7 kilowatts. You can get a zero-down, level payment, 20-year lease. The lease payment is $100 to $110 per month, $120 to $125 electricity savings per month, Tom didn't do his homework, and he made a bad financial and sustainability decision as a result. I will push for a solar-powered, sustainable Tucson. I will be a full-time council member, and as the signs say, I will bring new energy to the old Pueblo.
In the course of this campaign, I was both surprised and disappointed to learn that Steve boasted about bringing Caterpillar Corporation to this city, to this community. Among other things, this company has been cited for international human rights violations, but moreover, they do millions of dollars of business with the extractive mining industry. This is not sustainable. The reason I mention this is that it points to the old paradigm. My campaign is here to change that storyline. We're bringing a Green New Deal to Tucson, thousands of clean energy jobs for Tucsonans, retrofit, energy conservation, solar, and water harvesting. Thank you.
Thank you all. This has been a very informative. Last things I'd like to say are that we still have lots of things to drink and eat for you to share over there, and there's lots of literature from the candidates and from our co-sponsors, so please look at it.